if we're going to have civilization, we have to bring this drug thing under control. It's killing us globally. It's killing us in the United States. And it's a 68er phenomenon. It's a phenomenon which is created by the British intelligence. And we have to defeat that weapon. We have to defeat that entirely, crush it.
An overdose epidemic exploded onto the national scene several years ago, devastating communities across the country, and it's only gotten worse. Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of death for people under 50, and President Trump just declared this crisis a national emergency. But right now, the solutions being discussed, like expanding addiction treatment, only address the symptoms rather than the causes. Drugs have always been a choice tool for the British Empire. To effectively deal with this crisis, you have to confront the fact that the mass drugging of the American people has been a deliberate policy, the British Empire's new opium war, to create an environment in which everyday drug usage is normal, because a doped-up population is content and servile. Once that's clear, we can break from the system of British control and address why our people are in such despair by rebuilding our economy.
I prefer that broader definition of liberty, under which we are moving forward to greater freedom, to greater security for the average man than he has ever known before.
All the potential of the post-war period of global development that FDR intended to overthrow the system of empire and colonialism, which Eisenhower and the Kennedy brothers supported, and of which the civil rights and anti-war movements were propitious, was sabotaged by the British Empire. Through a succession of terrorizing events, assassinations and their subsequent cover-ups, Cold Wars, the threat of nuclear annihilation, and the completely synthetic, CIA-orchestrated rock, drug, sex counterculture, the British achieved a cultural paradigm shift.
When did it become the norm for a human being to never suffer discomfort, to never be unhappy, to never be sad? Some things make you sad, and they should make you sad. When you see countries subjected to genocide, when you look at your children and you know that they have no possibility of productive employment, that should cause you discomfort. And taking a pill is not going to solve it. And saying that you must take this pill, that you are addicted to this, what people are addicted to is avoiding reality.
The 68ers were induced to run away from a painful reality and seek escape in personal pleasures, while their experiments in self-expression were all meticulously engineered intelligence operations. This counterculture became the culture, and popular opinion was transformed to shape the events that made us what we are today, a looted, post-industrial wreck. Lyndon LaRouche and his associates took the British Empire head-on with a damning expose called Dope Inc., first published in 1978. They exposed the top-down, London-centered nature of the global banking system that launders trillions of dollars of not just drug money, but all kinds of criminal revenue, used to run coups, assassinations, weapons trafficking, and terrorism.
The reason it's called Dope Inc. is because we very quickly discovered that these were not isolated drug runners, for sure, isolated drug consumers, or even isolated banks. This was a single, top-down, coordinated, transnational or multinational financial organization, properly called Dope Inc. And behind the whole thing, lo and behold, were the exact same banks that ran the opium wars against China a century before. Literally the same banks, Standard & Chartered, Lloyd's, and so on. And you've got to look at the consumption problem and the production problem as features of this central, intentional, global war run by the British like they ran the Opium Wars, to maintain colonial properties of theirs, which they would like the United States to be once again, in total submission and drugged unwillingness to fight or inability to fight. And the same thing on the producer side of devastated countries, which were devastated by their economic policies, the British economic policies, and then coming in and offering them the only option for survival, which is, hey, why don't you grow some pot? Why don't you grow some coca? Why don't you grow some poppy? That's Dope Inc.
Today, the deregulated banking system doesn't just facilitate this kind of illegal activity. In the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, the banks were drug dependent. Drug money laundering became the main source of liquidity for the collapsing banks.
The international financial system and the big banks are addicted to drug money worse than a heroin junkie is addicted to heroin. They absolutely depend on it in a requirement, and they will do anything, and have done anything, to make sure that this grows. They're addicted. They're junkies. They need the flow of these drug dollars, which is like $1 trillion a year at least, as one of various things that they use to prop up their bankrupt financial bubble. Eric Holder, Mr. Obama's Attorney General at the time, implementing Obama's policy, issued what is known as the Holder Letter. And the Holder Letter says, we will not prosecute any of the big banks caught in laundering drug money because it could bring down the whole financial system.
Most crucially, in LaRouche's work, he addresses the strategic motive behind the British Empire's promotion of mind-destroying drugs, the subjugation of whole populations to a form of mental slavery. Advancement in human civilization is the work of the mind. The mind is the source of scientific and artistic creativity, and it's what distinguishes human beings from animals. Take away the mind, and we're just a bunch of beasts fit for slaughter. Just to give a little taste of the oligarchy's mentality, this is from a speech by Aldous Huxley in 1961. Huxley, of the British aristocracy, is possibly the most important conceptual architect of the counterculture. He came to the U.S. in the 1930s to prepare for the mass dissemination of drugs and was a key person in the MK-Ultra programs. There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak. Producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution. Again, the deadliest drug epidemic in U.S. history is no accident. A concert of Big Pharma, Wall Street, President Obama, and George Soros, along with a financial blowout and a rigged healthcare system, all worked together to produce this unprecedented catastrophe.
You can look at the opioid crisis as a quote-unquote sociological phenomena, but that's really a load of garbage. You do not have a 3,000% increase in the use of a particular drug just based on sociology.
Meet Arthur Sackler, of the Sackler family that owns Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of OxyContin, and more importantly, the manufacturer of the demand for OxyContin.
This particular aspect of the drug epidemic began with Arthur Sackler, whose family owns Purdue Pharmaceuticals, who own the patent here, but his real breakthrough was not in the drug. His breakthrough was, he was a psychiatrist, and what he pioneered was the marketing of drugs to physicians and a methodology by which people would demand prescription drugs from their physicians. Within a couple of years, they founded a number of different associations that didn't exist before, the American Pain Management Association, and things like this, who began to rate doctors on their willingness to manage pain. You had the Joint Commission on Healthcare Accreditation, which is a quasi-governmental organization that put out a report condemning doctors for not treating pain seriously. And that, combined with what Purdue was doing, which was giving out an awful lot of free samples to physicians, caused a total transformation in the healthcare industry.
The shift to pain management became hegemonic. Pain was named the fifth vital sign, so that being pain-free is on par with a healthy heart rate and body temperature. The estimated total number of opioid prescriptions in the U.S. more than doubled from 2000 to 2010. In 2012, 259 million prescriptions were written for narcotic opioids, which is more than enough to give every American adult their own bottle of pills.
The irony of it, OxyContin and other opiates are really not very good for chronic pain management. They stop being effective after a very short period of time. It's well known that, and now very well documented, that these drugs affect your cognitive ability, they affect physical coordination, they affect every aspect of your metabolism. So if someone, for some reason, really needs long-term pain management, this is a really, really bad solution. But they lied and they got away with it.
President Obama encouraged drug use in this country by not enforcing federal anti-drug laws. Obama's 2008 campaign had been largely backed by one of the British Empire's top operatives, the notorious drug pusher George Soros. He has successfully spent hundreds of millions of dollars on drug legalization campaigns in the U.S., and the suckers think they're now free to do what they feel like doing. No, you're now free to do what Soros wants you to. Obama also made it clear, with growing prescription opioid abuse and overdoses, that Big Pharma, like the big banks, is too big to jail. Much ado was made of the huge fines imposed on drug distributors, Cardinal Health and McKesson, for allowing millions of pills to get into the black markets. In reality, the DEA was prevented from taking cases against drug distribution companies to court for prosecution. They agreed to a settlement, paid their fine, and went on with their business. But what really takes the cake here is that Big Pharma, which makes the opiates people are overdosing on, also makes the overdose reversal medication with increasingly higher price tags. In 2008, when opioid overdoses were first declared an epidemic, the lowlifes at Hospira, then the primary distributor of naloxone, increased its price 1,100%.
Today, after all the votes have been tallied, health insurance reform becomes law in the United States of America.
President Obama's signature health care legislation, the Affordable Care Act, was never anything but a money-making scheme for the insurance companies. A law, written by the insurance companies, mandating everyone buy insurance from them, it's not hard to figure out who benefits from that one.
If somebody really suffers from chronic pain because of arthritis, maybe what they need is a knee replacement or a hip replacement. Very common. But you could avoid that simply by dulling the pain. It gives you an idea of the framework in which Obamacare functions, so that the dispensing of pharmaceuticals of everything ranging from opioids to antidepressants to anti-anxiety drugs is much cheaper than providing medical care.
Another problem is that under an Obamacare initiative, Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements to hospitals were based on criteria including a patient satisfaction survey, with questions like, did the hospital staff do everything they could to help you with your pain? In different surveys of doctors, as many as half reported that they improperly prescribed narcotics because of the pressure of patient satisfaction. As you know, people got hooked on painkillers, and when that got too expensive, many progressed to heroin, which is now cheaper and widely available.
As the price of heroin was deliberately lowered, which is what's being done now as well with the opioids, as the price went down, consumption went up. It's a straight X-curve, exactly like that. This is plain marketing techniques. I mean, this is what they teach at Harvard, among the other crimes they teach at Harvard. But the way they lower the price is they run it. It's a cartel. It's Dope Inc. It's the drug cartel. And they run the prices of marijuana and the THC content, I should note as well. It's just gotten much more powerful, and of heroin, and of the synthetic drugs, all of that.
The vast majority of heroin users today say they got started on prescription opioids. The pharmaceutical companies lied that their products were safe, with users having virtually no chance of becoming addicted. The exact opposite's true. They're highly addictive, and the longer you use it, the more you need. The pharmaceutical companies accomplished what the drug cartels only dreamed of, opening up a market in white, middle, and working class demographics with a voracious appetite for opiates. And where is all this heroin in the world coming from? Mostly Afghanistan and Mexico, two countries destroyed by our policies of war and globalization.
In one sense, these aren't policy failures. These are policy successes, because the policy of the British and the policy of the Obama State Department and the policy of Bush was to do this intentionally. They succeeded. It's a failure for the United States. But these are foreign powers, including those encrusted in the United States, carrying this out. Look at Afghanistan. The amounts of opium which are produced in Afghanistan are staggering. And most of it are produced in the British-run southern provinces like Helmand. And this was done intentionally. And you create a war zone where there's no country. You just create a failed state, destroy the economy, exactly that way that you were saying, and that's what you get.
At an anti-drug conference in Mexico City in 1985, LaRouche described Dope Inc. as an evil and powerful government in its own right. He said it represents a financial, political, and military power greater than that of entire nations. So to shut it down, you have to fight it on that level. You need the deployment of law enforcement and military forces. You need an international alliance to combat the growing, processing, and transporting of drugs. But you destroy this quasi-state by destroying and confiscating their economic and financial resources, with special attention concentrated on the banks, insurance enterprises, and other business institutions which make up this international cartel. That's a war on drugs. You know you're not serious about saving this country if the bankers who wrecked it have not gone to jail.
Let me just say that the idea of a war on drugs, people say, oh, the war on drugs has failed. There's never been a war on drugs. There has never been an actual serious attempt to destroy the drug trade. So don't tell me it's failed. It hasn't been tried.
The question is, are you going to address it from the top? Are you going to address it from the standpoint of what your economic and financial policy is going to be? Are you going to address it from a cultural standpoint of providing a sense of cultural optimism, a sense of a future?
Our people have witnessed nothing but decline for generations now, with no indication that the trajectory will change. So of course they're demoralized. Of course they're susceptible to drug abuse. Now it's time to cut the crap. seriously. Let's make America great again. And LaRouche has laid out how to do it with his 4 laws for an economic recovery. Reinstate Glass-Steagall. That absolutely dries up the dirty money flows as well as all the other toxic waste in the banks. Return to a national banking system with a large issuance of federal credit to go into development projects that emphasize new areas of scientific breakthrough. Without these policies, we're doomed to a broken healthcare system, a despairing population, and much worse. The countries that are leading the world in creating a new global paradigm for development are China and Russia, the 2 countries you're supposed to fear and hate the most. They're not the enemy. The British Empire is. That's who runs the world of geopolitical manipulation. Well, good riddance. Let's make our people optimistic by giving them their future back.